The 7 tombs of the last popes of the Catholic Church. The tomb of Pope Pius XII, 1939 to 1958. Location: St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. Eugenio Pacelli, who took the name Pius XII, began his pontificate in March 1939 on the eve of World War II. As Pope, he would have the arduous task of guiding the Church during the global conflict and its post-war period. Pius XII is remembered for his intense spiritual life and Marian devotion. He defined the dogma of the Assumption of Mary in 1950, but above all, for his discreet efforts to alleviate the hardships of war. In the midst of the conflict, he maintained the neutrality of the Holy See, while working behind the scenes to save lives, as some grateful Jewish communities later acknowledged. After the war, he raised his voice against the new dangers of atheistic communism and promoted the moral reconstruction of Europe. Pius XII died on October 9, 1958, at the papal residence of Castel Gandolfo at the age of 82. His death moved the city of Rome, which bid him farewell as a hero of dark times. Pius XII's funeral in St. Peter's Basilica drew crowds, and his body was later buried in the Vatican grottos, in accordance with his wish for a modest burial. In fact, Pope Pacelli had humbly requested to be buried without pomp. His tomb in the Vatican crypt is sober, just a marble slab bearing his name, reflecting the simplicity he requested. Years later, a small sculpture of the child Jesus was placed on it, added by St. John Paul II in 1982 as a token of veneration. Those who visit the tomb of Pius XII often recall the motto on his coat of arms, Opus Justitiae Pax, peace is the fruit of justice, a phrase that came to life in his efforts for world peace. In the silence of the crypt, the figure of Pius XII continues to inspire reflection on moral conscience in times of war, and the hope for justice and peace that he held out until the end. The tomb of Pope John XXIII, 1958 to 1963. Location: St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, affectionately called the Good Pope, was elected in 1958 as John XXIII. With his warmth and approachability, he won the hearts of the world in a very short time. Although his pontificate lasted less than 5 years, John XXIII initiated a momentous event. He convened the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council, opening the windows of the Church to a profound aggiornamento, or updating. During his life, he served as a diplomat and Patriarch of Venice, always standing out for his kindness and simplicity. As Pope, he promoted peace. His 1963 encyclical Paxem in Terris is a hymn to concord among peoples and sought to build bridges with the modern world. In his final months, he calmly faced stomach cancer. He died on June 3, 1963, at the age of 81, surrounded by the love and prayers of millions who saw in him a true pastor and father. Rome mourned the good Pope with sincere emotion, but his legacy was only just beginning to be felt with the council he had initiated. Originally, John XXIII was buried in the grottos beneath St. Peter's Basilica, near the tomb of the Apostle Peter. His remains remained there for 38 years, while his reputation for holiness grew among the faithful who came to pray at his tomb. In the Jubilee year of 2000, following his beatification, Pope John Paul II decided to move his remains inside the basilica for easier access by pilgrims. When his coffin was opened, John XXIII's body was found to be amazingly intact, almost incorrupt, with a sweet, sleep-like expression on his face. On June 3, 2001, exactly 38 years after his death, his remains were solemnly transferred to the Chapel of St. Jerome in the nave of St. Peter's. Today, his body, clothed in papal attire, rests visible in a glass urn beneath the altar of that chapel, where the faithful can clearly contemplate it. The scene is haunting. John XXIII lies incorrupt, like a shepherd still watching over his flock, radiating the peace and goodness that characterized him. Canonized in 2014, his tomb has become one of the most visited corners of the Basilica, a tangible reminder of the good Pope who inaugurated a new springtime in the Church. The tomb of Pope Paul VI, 1963 to 1978. Location: St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. Giovanni Battista Montini succeeded John XXIII in 1963, taking the name Paul VI. He had the titanic task of leading the Church through the turbulent 1960s, concluding the Second Vatican Council in 1965, and implementing its reforms in years of accelerated change. Paul VI was an introspective and courageous man. He traveled to every continent like no pope before him. He was the first pontiff to visit all 5 continents, yearning to bring the Church closer to the world. He published notable encyclicals on dialogue with humanity, Ecclesiam Suam, 1964, and modern evangelization, Evangelii Nuntiandi, 1975. He also faced difficult decisions with great fortitude, such as his defense of life and morality in Humanae Vitae, 1968. His 15-year pontificate experienced the fervor of the post-conciliar council with its hopes and tensions. Paul VI always maintained a serene demeanor, a profound faith, and a special love for the poor. He died on August 6, 1978, in Castel Gandolfo at the age of 80 after a long heart illness. The world bid farewell with respect to the Pope of dialogue and tireless pilgrimage. In keeping with his humble spirit, Paul VI arranged for his funeral to be austere and his burial to be extremely simple. He was buried under the floor of St. Peter's Basilica, literally in the ground, without an elaborate sarcophagus or any monument. In keeping with his wishes, his tomb does not rise from the ground. It is a simple pale marble slab at the level of the Vatican grottos, marked only with his name. On the tombstone, on the day of his burial, a bouquet of white roses was placed, a symbol of the purity of heart with which he served. This unusual simplicity for a pope was shocking to many, but it reflects the profound humility of Paul VI, who had even renounced the tiara at the beginning of his pontificate. Today, canonized as St. Paul VI, 2018, his simple tomb continues to move visitors. In the dimness of the crypt, that modest slab seems to whisper the message of a pastor who did not seek honors, but rather service. The stone merely reads Paulus pp. 6, but the memory of this wise and courageous pope magnifies this silent corner of the Vatican. The tomb of Pope John Paul I, 1978. Location: St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. Albino Luciani occupied the chair of Peter for just 33 days in 1978, one of the shortest pontificates in history, but his mark was indelible. With his constant smile and simple style, John Paul I immediately won over the faithful, earning him the nickname, the Smiling Pope. In just over a month, he outlined a program of evangelical closeness and simplicity. He spoke with a familiar tone in his addresses and presented a more human image of the papacy. He renounced the pomp of papal coronation and chose a double name in honor of his predecessors, John XXIII and Paul VI, demonstrating his intention to continue their legacy. Sadly, his sudden death on September 28, 1978, at the age of 65, shocked and saddened the world. Although it was officially attributed to an acute myocardial infarction, the lack of an autopsy gave rise to many conspiracy theories, which have been refuted by subsequent investigations. The truth is that millions mourned John Paul I, whose humility and warmth had given new hope in such a short time. After his death, John Paul I was buried on October 4, 1978, in the Vatican grottos beneath St. Peter's Basilica. His tomb, simple and discreet, is located near those of other 20th century pontiffs. The white marble tombstone bears his name and dates, as well as the papal coat of arms with the motto Humilitas, humility, the virtue he so often preached by his example. For decades, his tomb was one of the most visited in the Vatican crypt, as the endearing figure of John Paul I aroused enormous devotion. Many pilgrims left notes or flower petals, remembering his kind smile. In 2022, he was declared blessed by Pope Francis, further fueling interest in his tomb as a place of prayer. Although his pontificate was short-lived, praying in front of his final resting place reveals the luminous presence of that smiling pope, who in a few days taught more with his simplicity and love than many have in many years. His tomb remains as a call to humility and joy in serving God. The tomb of Pope John Paul II, 1978 to 2005. Location: St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. Caro Wojtyla, Pope John Paul II, was a giant of the 20th century. Elected in October 1978, his pontificate lasted almost 27 years, one of the longest in history. A native of Poland, he experienced Nazi and communist totalitarianism firsthand, which forged in him an indomitable spirit. As Pope, he traveled tirelessly around the world, making 104 international trips, bringing a message of faith and hope to millions. He played a historic role in the fall of the Iron Curtain, decisively supporting the thirst for freedom in Eastern Europe. He instituted World Youth Day, bringing the Church closer to young people. He survived a serious attack in 1981, forgiving his attacker in a gesture that moved the world. John Paul II was also a prolific writer and thinker, promoting the dignity of the person and the civilization of love. His final years, marked by Parkinson's disease, were a living testimony of suffering born with faith. He died on April 2, 2005, at the age of 84 in Vatican City. The crowd gathered in St. Peter's Square spontaneously acclaimed, "Santo Subito," sudden saint, reflecting the popular clamor for his sanctity. The Polish Pope was initially buried in the Vatican grottos in a niche that had previously housed the tomb of John XXIII. There, beneath a simple white marble slab bearing his name, his remains rested for 6 years. The influx of pilgrims to his burial was massive from the first day, turning that corner into a gathering place for prayers, letters, and flowers. In May 2011, following his beatification, John Paul II's remains were transferred inside St. Peter's Basilica. His new tomb is located in the Chapel of St. Sebastian, the second chapel on the right from the entrance, very close to Michelangelo's famous sculpture of the Pieta. Today, an elegant marble tablet bearing the inscription Sanctus Ioannis Paulus pp2 marks his raised grave beneath the altar of that chapel. There, faithful always kneel in prayer, candles and flowers adorn him, a reflection of the enormous devotion that John Paul II continues to inspire. His canonization in 2014 only confirmed what the people of God felt since his passing. The tomb of St. John Paul II is one of the most visited places in the Vatican. Before it, many find comfort and inspiration in the witness of a pope who was not afraid to tear down walls, both physical and of the heart. The tomb of Pope Benedict XVI, 2005 to 2013. Location: St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. Joseph Ratzinger, who took the name Benedict XVI, came to the papacy in 2005 after the long pontificate of his friend John Paul II. A brilliant German theologian, Benedict XVI, sought to reaffirm faith in a secularized Europe, always with his gentle and reflective style. During his nearly 8-year pontificate, he imparted profound and clarifying teaching. His encyclicals on love, Deus Caritas Est, and hope, Spe Salvi, are examples of this and proclaimed the Year of Faith. In 2013, he surprised the world with a gesture of great humility and courage. He resigned the pontificate, citing a lack of strength, becoming the first pope to abdicate in nearly 6 centuries. Since then, he lived in retirement as Pope Emeritus in a monastery within the Vatican, dedicated to prayer and study, setting an unprecedented example of simplicity and power. Benedict XVI died on December 31, 2022, at the age of 95, at the Mater Ecclesiae Monastery. His death closed an era, and many felt it was the departure of a wise father of the Church. Following protocol for a Pope Emeritus, Benedict XVI received solemn but simple funeral honors, and his body was buried in the Vatican grottos, in the same tomb that had previously housed John XXIII and John Paul II. In fact, the niche chosen beneath St. Peter's Basilica is historically significant. John XXIII rested there until 2001, and then John Paul II until 2011, both of whom were moved upon their beatification. Now, Benedict XVI rests in that venerable place, closing the cycle of 20th century popes. His tomb follows the traditional model, a white marble tablet bearing his name, Benedictus pp. 16, and the dates, covering the triple coffin, cypress, zinc, and oak, that holds his remains. The day after his burial, the papal crypt was opened, and numerous faithful began to approach him to pray. Many remember with emotion his farewell words. "Lord, I love you," he would have said before dying, according to witnesses. This devotion of love to God is symbolized in the stillness of his tomb. Amid the shadows of the Vatican crypt, the figure of Benedict XVI remains spiritually luminous, a humble pope in life and death, whose intellectual and spiritual legacy will continue to inspire the Church for generations. The Tomb of Pope Francis, 2013 to 2025. Location: Basilica of St. Mary Major, Rome. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, was the first Latin American pontiff and a Jesuit elected in 2013. With his approachable, austere, and reformist style, Francis revitalized the social message of the gospel, placing the poor, migrants, and marginalized at the center. His open smile and simple language broke down protocols, winning the sympathy of many beyond the church. He insisted on an outgoing church and a field hospital, promoted mercy, Jubilee of Mercy 2016, and care for creation, encyclical Laudato Si 2015. During his pontificate, he carried out reforms in the Curia, firmly confronted the abuse crisis, and traveled to peripheral areas to spread hope. Francis also showed special devotion to the Virgin Mary, frequently visiting the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome to pray before the icon of the Salus Populi Romani before and after each apostolic journey. Towards the end of 2024, his health began to decline. Francis died in 2025 at the age of 88, leaving behind a legacy of evangelical simplicity and a call to universal brotherhood. His passing moved the entire world, which recognized him as a moral leader in uncertain times. True to his unconventional style, Pope Francis arranged for burial outside the Vatican, something that had not happened to a pontiff since the beginning of the 20th century. He chose, as his final resting place, the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome, a Marian temple to which he was deeply devoted. After the mass funeral in St. Peter's Square, his coffin was carried in procession through the streets of Rome to Santa Maria Maggiore, where he was buried in an intimate ceremony, surrounded by cardinals, family members, and also a group of poor and marginalized people he had specially invited, each carrying a white rose in his honor. Pope Francis's tomb is located in the aisle of this basilica, between the Pauline Chapel, where the icon of the Virgin he so venerated is kept, and the Sforza Chapel. In accordance with his wishes, it is a simple burial, in the ground. A tombstone of white Ligurian marble, where his grandparents came from, covers his remains, bearing the inscription of his papal name, Franciscus, and a large silver reproduction of his pectoral cross engraved in the stone. Francis thus wished to be remembered with humility, only as a servant of the servants of God. From the day after his burial, his tomb in Santa Maria Maggiore was open to the faithful. Today, pilgrims from around the world come to this Marian shrine not only to honor the Virgin, but also to pray before the simple tomb of the Pope, who taught them by example the tenderness, social justice, and joy of the gospel. In the silence of that basilica, beside the icon of Mary, rests Francis, the Pope, who preferred a poor church for the poor, leaving an indelible mark of love and service in the history of the Church.
Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.